A conflict resolution expert says the government has already fulfilled its promises to the military veterans. This follows a situation in which Defence and Military Veterans Minister Thandi Modise, her deputy Thabang Makwetla and Minister in the Presidency Mondli Gungubele were allegedly held hostage at a hotel in Irene in Pretoria on Thursday night. 56 military veterans have been arrested following the alleged hostage drama. The military veterans are believed to have been from the ANC military wing Condon, the PAC's APLA and Azapo's Azanla. Well, government has allegedly honored the agreement made between both parties. All right, to talk to us about the hostage negotiations as well as the before and the after processes to follow in these instances is a hostage negotiator and founder of Global Bodyguard Services, Kyle Condon. Kyle, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us and a warm welcome to the Globe.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening to the viewers.
All right, first of all, Kyle, what goes into negotiation or negotiating for, hostages?
Well, I think, one needs to understand that the complexities when it comes to a hostage situation depends entirely on the situation itself. I mean, each hostage scenario plays out in its own realm. I mean, we have political hostage situations, we have criminal hostage situations, we have family and private. So each one depends entirely on what the hostage taker, for want of a better word, or takers, is trying to get out of the event itself. And I think fundamentally, that's what one needs to understand. There's not one blanket approach to it. It is something that needs to be handled in a manner in which it's directed at that particular situation itself.
So what other aspects of policing do hostage negotiators work in? Well, I mean,
primarily hostage negotiators have a bachelor's degree. Many of them are counselors. Many are volunteers, in fact. South Africa has, I would say, I'll go so far as to say that South Africa, unfortunately, doesn't have as many skilled, experienced and trained negotiators as what we would probably want. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's something sorely lacking within the police force on a whole. There are many talented individuals out there and negotiators out there who are brilliant at what they do. Unfortunately, they're few and far between. So when situations evolve, they may not be in your small towns or your areas. They need to be brought in. They need to be found. The database on the SABC system is sorely lacking when it comes to sourcing who can handle a particular type of negotiation. And I think we've seen that unfold several times over the last couple of years.
You just mentioned that these negotiators are trained, some even have bachelor's degrees. So what attributes does a negotiator need to have in order to be able to be successful in this field?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's a people skill. It's a soft skill.
Yes.
It's not an aggressive skill. Negotiating is very much a emotional intelligence skill that's needed. You are almost a counselor. You're trying to defuse a situation by using diplomacy, by appealing to the hostage taker in terms of what it is they're trying to, or they're wanting to get out of their situation. So these are skills that the individual needs to have, and they vary. There are varied skills. It's not something that one is just naturally inclined to have. You've got to develop them. And it's managerial. You're dealing with a human. It's a human interaction.
We know that there's different types of hostages. Some of these captors, they're demanding money, or they're demanding a certain service from authorities, or they're demanding some of their demands to be met, or coercing the authorities to meet some of their demands. So these negotiators, what is it that they offer to the captors in return for the hostages?
Well, that depends. Again, I mean, entirely, this is not a one-blanket-fits-all situation. Mm-hmm. What we're looking at is what the captors want, whether the captors have found themselves forced into a hostage situation, which can happen in something, for example, at a crime scene. Let's just take a bank robbery gone wrong. The captors or the hostage takers, they wanted to leave. They didn't plan on sticking it out. They were hoping to get out of there, but now they're trapped. So the approach to them is going to be very different to the approach as we saw at the St. George's Hotel. That was, I would go so far as to say there's some publicity there. There was a different view. The risk itself had to be looked at in context. I don't believe that there was any real physical risk that was going to be posed. I think this was that was just it was great for publicity for them. So each scenario requires a different approach, and that is what a skilled negotiator can do. He or she can assess that situation, assess where their sort of line is drawn. I mean, there's no negotiator in the world that is going to go into a negotiation and sit there and have these conversations and promise anybody that they're going to diffuse it. But what they are trying to do is they're trying to buy time. We're trying to understand what is going to best serve the hostage taker, and ultimately those victims that are involved in the situation, how they are going to effectively get out of this unscathed. So that's the reality behind the negotiator. That's what he or she tries to do.
And just how important is it to have background information on these captors or the perpetrators of the hostage situation?
Oh, I mean, everything is about information. Policing is about information. Surgery, as a doctor, it's about information. You need to be, the more forewarned you are on a situation, the better you prepare. If we are dealing with a terrorism scenario or fundamentalists, you need to understand that the chance of negotiating a successful outcome there is going to be considerably less than if we're talking about somebody who's found themselves in a precarious position, maybe a crime gone wrong. You can bring them down. You can negotiate in terms of letting them understand that mistakes happen. We all do bad things. There's certain there's strategies to it. There is certainly strategies towards the way you approach this. And I think that's what the movies don't portray that. What we see on films and television, etc., doesn't portray that. We need to know where you are mentally. A good negotiator will certainly want to know more about you. And if you're a group, that becomes very difficult.
Now, just looking at the hostage drama that unfolded at Irene Hotel in Centurion, wherein the Defence Minister Thandi Modise was held hostage together with a deputy, and the negotiations failing to yield the desired results, what do you think could have been done differently?
Well, hard one. I mean, I wasn't involved personally. I certainly wasn't. None of my staff were involved. So, it's hard to comment from an outsider's perspective when you weren't personally there. But I do know this in the sense that when one looks at the entire dynamic and how it played out, you were dealing there with a group of, if we want to call them hostage takers, but it was a group, and that's more of a crowd influence as opposed to what I would refer to, or in the industry, a genuine hostage situation. No real demands were made whereby there was a definite risk or a definite threat to the individuals or the victims, in this particular case, taken hostage. But I think what concerns me is that leading up to the event, there was media exposure. There was, I had read in the newspapers the days before that the military veterans were unhappy. So again, it just goes down to intelligence. You asked the question about how important is background and intelligence. Well, there's your answer. We saw this with the looting going back a couple of months ago. Right. Where is our national intelligence? Where is the ability? And as a negotiator, you want to walk into a situation prepared. You certainly want to walk in and sit down knowing that what the risk is and what the history behind this is. So I just think the policing system, I think the whole system fails when it comes to this type of thing. And we saw that the other day.
And just how important is language and tone in the whole hostage negotiation? Because I would imagine if the negotiators adopt a much more aggressive tone, well, the situation could get out of control. And if they adopt a much more calm demeanor, then they might not get the desired result.
Look, we're talking about man management. As I said, these are soft skills. You want to sit and many times, I mean, in the modern era, we've got things like Zoom, etc. But for the most part, I mean, negotiating is done over a telephone or even by email. But the fact is, you need to come across to the hostage taker, the HT as we call them. We need to come across as sympathetic. That's important. And in many cases, we are sympathetic. I mean, people get caught up in situations, but one cannot ever be aggressive. I mean, that's not the role of a negotiator.
Okay.
A negotiator is there to be that bridge between the victims, the hostage taker, the family on the outside, because we very often forget that there's family and there's parties on the outside that are just as affected, and then the media, because I mean the media is there, and are we playing to the media? Is the hostage taker playing to the media? All of these things come into play. So you want to remain neutral. Absolutely, there's no negotiating there. One needs to remain absolutely neutral.
Just a quick question, Carl. What are some of the important aspects, to look at the spur of the moment when on the field diffusing a potentially fatal situation?
First thing is always doing your best, and you're doing it, as I said, by voice, yes. Primarily. But the first thing is to stop, understand what the hostage taker is trying to achieve, or takers. Okay. What is the objective? Get that first. Once that's understood, the line is drawn, the parameters are there. One can then work within those parameters. You've got to get them to understand there's somebody on their side trying to help them, but cannot do so unless they're prepared to play their part.
All right. Kyle, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for your analysis of this matter.
Yeah. Pleasure. Right. Absolute pleasure.
Indeed. Thank you. That was Kyle Condon. He's a hostage negotiator and founder of Global Bodyguard Services.